This year, I decided to release a Halloween-themed podcast. We will talk about 4 cases of missing persons who would all eventually be found. None of these cases occurred on or near Halloween, but the circumstances around their discovery are so creepy and disturbing, they seem more like a horror movie than real life. Let's talk about some real-life Halloween horrors. Larry Eli Murillo Moncada was 25 years old and lived in Council Bluffs, Iowa, where he worked at the No Frills supermarket. He had been experiencing some hallucinations, and because of this, on November 27, 2009, he fled his parents' house barefoot, leaving behind his keys and his car. He said that somebody was following him and that he was scared. He would be officially reported missing the next day. Law enforcement conducted a search, as well as interviewing his family and friends. They also checked nearby detention centers and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, as reports state he had been deported to Honduras before making his way back to the United States. Despite searches, there were no leads on Murillo Moncada, and his case soon grew cold. In 2016, the supermarket location where the missing man worked would close its doors. 3 years later, on January 24, 2019, some contractors were employed to remove shelves and coolers in the vacant building. Nothing could prepare them for what they found. As the workers removed the freezer units, they found human remains behind one of the freezers. It took them 6 months and a DNA match with relatives to conclusively identify the remains. After missing for 10 years, Larry Eli Murillo Moncada had been found. But how did this happen? First off, an autopsy was performed and the remains showed no evidence of foul play. Police speculate that the night Murillo Moncada disappeared, he ran from his home to the grocery store. He then climbed on the coolers, which some of the workers would do on occasion, and then fell into a roughly 18-inch gap between the back of the cooler and the wall and became trapped. They believe the noise of the cooler's compressor probably muffled any cries for help. They said the store wasn't searched that day after he was reported missing because he wasn't on the schedule to work. As far as the conditions that night, it was said to have been a snowstorm. His parents also said that he may have been off of his prescription meds, and if so, he would not have been in the right frame of mind. We do know that when he left his parents' house, he was very upset and had been having hallucinations. This all could have contributed to the strange predicament he was found in. It is so disturbing to think of him stuck there. Did he yell for help, and how long was he conscious? Or did the stress and shock of it all cause him to lose consciousness quickly? I saw many comments online of people who were at the store in those 10 years, and many complained to the workers of a terrible smell. It was stated in one article that police didn't go to the store when he was reported missing because he wasn't on the schedule to work. What? I truly hope that account was incorrect. I can't imagine law enforcement not bothering to check where a missing person worked just because he wasn't supposed to work that day. So many complaints of a terrible unknown smell, and an employee who works there is missing, yet no one thinks to do a thorough search of the store. This case is a terrible tragedy, and the way that this poor man died is something that nightmares are made of. For the next case, we need to go across the pond to the United Kingdom. In the spring of 1998, Alan Derrick lived in a flat in Bristol, UK. He was an older man and would often go drinking with his friend, 73-year-old Dennis Pring. The men were around the same age and would have a good laugh together. Derrick would even invite his friend to live with him, as he knew that he had been looking for a place to stay. The years would go by and nothing seemed wrong with the two roommates and their arrangement. Then in January of 2008, Alan Derrick was evicted from his apartment in Bristol. A cleaning crew was employed to go through and clean out the apartment. While beginning to clean the place out, workers were absolutely horrified at what they would find. When they lifted the couch, they saw decomposed remains. It was eventually determined to be Dennis Pring, Alan Derrick's former roommate and friend. A coroner's inquest would soon unravel this macabre scene. According to neighbor Reggie Askin, who spoke to Derrick after the body was found, one night when Alan Derrick came home, Dennis Pring was dead. Derrick panicked and worried that he would get in trouble for having a lodger staying with him. Fearing he would be evicted if his secret roommate was revealed, he just turned the sofa over on top of the body. He then lived with his friend's dead body in his apartment for the next 10 years. He told his neighbor, "I can't believe it. I just forgot he was there." During the 10 years, neighbors had complained to the council about foul smells coming from the flat, and authorities even visited twice, but said they believed the smells were coming from the bathroom and were plumbing related. A few people even recalled walking past the overturned sofa, but didn't notice the body underneath. It appeared that Dennis Pring was living off the grid and perhaps didn't have any living relatives, so that could have been why he was never officially reported missing. After the inquest was over, it was decided that no charges were brought against Alan Derrick, but going forward, procedures for caring for vulnerable people were improved. As far as my thoughts on this case, it is so bizarre and just a sad set of circumstances. One article did say that it was thought Alan Derrick had some mental challenges, and that would make sense given his choices. I know in his mind he was doing what he had to do to not get evicted, but given the fact that the roommate had just died, might have gotten him off with just a warning. In his desperation to keep his housing, he treated his friend with so much disrespect in how he handled the remains. I won't say much more than that, because if Alan Derrick did have mental issues, then perhaps he wasn't able to think or act logically in this situation. No matter how he acted, it was terrible that Dennis Pring had to lay there hidden for all that time. I sincerely hope that after the discovery, they were able to lay him to rest with the dignity that he deserved. The third case we're going to talk about is from Michigan. Pia Fahrenkopf was born in 1965 and grew up near Boston with her 9 siblings. Her father would die in 1981 while she was still a teenager. Pia graduated from Boston's Cardinal Cushing Central High School in 1983. She was talented at art and was described as very smart but a loner. She was awarded a scholarship to the University of Massachusetts at Boston and started attending classes there in 1983. She attended classes there on and off, as well as a community college, but never graduated from either. In the 1990s, she worked for a technology company in Little Rock, Arkansas, where she programmed bank software for loan applications. Pia would eventually move to Michigan and lived a prosperous life there. She had a good job, traveled extensively, saved up some money, and spent over $100,000 on a nice house on Savannah Drive in Pontiac, Michigan. In 2003, she planned to start a fitness business called Slender Lady in Waterford. Details aren't known, but it appears that the business did not succeed. In May of 2008, Pia resigned her position at Alltel Information Services after 23 years with the company. The reason why is unclear. When she left her job, she reportedly had over $87,000 in her bank account. However, after that, no more deposits were made. It is unknown how she spent her days after leaving her job, although some articles say she worked at Chrysler Financial until September of 2008. During a traffic stop in October of 2008, she was charged with driving on a suspended license, expired plates, and no insurance. Then in February of 2009, she would take $1,500 from her bank account. It was the last withdrawal that she made. Although Pia Fahrenkopf came from a large family, it appears that they weren't close. They would apparently go years without seeing or hearing from her. Sometimes they would get a postcard from her in the mail during her travels abroad, yet other times they would call her and she wouldn't answer. So when years went by and they didn't hear from her, it wasn't out of the ordinary. Pia Fahrenkopf's neighbors didn't know her personally, but did know that she traveled a lot, so they just figured that she was on a trip. The post office would hold her mail, so it wasn't piling up outside. When her grass got too tall, a neighbor would mow it for her to keep things looking tidy in the neighborhood. Pia's monthly payments, including her mortgage, were on auto pay, so they were automatically taken out of her bank account. But in late 2013, the money apparently ran out, so the payments stopped. In January of 2014, the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings on the house. That same month, the bank sent 2 workers to inspect the house and garage and take photographs. The workers also entered her 2003 Jeep Liberty, which was parked in the garage, in order to open the glove box to check for the registration. They didn't notice anything amiss. Then a few months later, on March 5, 2014, the bank would send workers Matthew Anderson and Charles Goff from Trademark Property Solutions to the house to fix a hole in the roof and to also take pictures. They entered the garage and saw the SUV parked there. Goff said he saw what he thought was a Halloween mask in the back seat, so he opened the door. He said it smelled of death. Both workers ran from the garage and called 911. When the police arrived, they would find the most haunting scene. Pia Fahrenkopf's mummified remains were found sitting in the back seat driver's side of her SUV. The keys were in the ignition, but the Jeep was turned off, which would presumably rule out carbon monoxide as a cause of death. It was also reported that in the back seat with Pia were stacks of unopened mail, empty cigarette packs, and an almost empty bottle of wine. An autopsy was performed, and no definitive cause of death could be determined, but there were no signs of foul play. One of Pia's nieces, Nina Logan, would create a Facebook page in honor of her aunt titled Mummified in Michigan. She said she chose that name so people would know who she was talking about, but then later changed it to Pia Davida Fahrenkopf. The page was her way of clearing up misinformation concerning her aunt, as well as a place for people who knew and cared about her aunt to post information. Nina would also tell reporters that they tried to phone their aunt when their mother died and also when her sister died, but got no response. They had no idea that she was sitting in her Jeep dead, undiscovered, for years. The medical examiner did think that Pia Fahrenkopf had probably died in 2009, which means that her body lay in the back seat of her SUV in her garage, undiscovered, for a shocking 5 years. As far as my thoughts, what an incredibly sad case. I think a big reason that she was there undiscovered for so long was the private way that she chose to live her life. Her being out of touch for long periods of time didn't seem uncommon, so no one thought that anything was wrong. I was surprised that after her mother died and then her sister, that someone in the family wouldn't have driven to her house, but maybe they did. If they didn't have a key to the house and couldn't see that her vehicle was still inside, they probably would have just thought she was traveling, as she often did. The circumstances around her death are so odd. First off, why was she in the back seat of her car? Did she have all the unopened mail around her because she had just picked it up from the post office and hadn't yet brought it into the house? We don't really know how long between the time Pia was last known to be at her job and she died. The circumstances that were found with Pia being found in her SUV, in my opinion, either point to some sort of mental illness or depression. I think that it is possible that Pia chose to end her life, but I also think that she could have had a heart attack, or perhaps, if it was winter months and it being Michigan, may have even died from hypothermia. There's no other way of looking at it than this being a tragic circumstance, and I am glad that she was eventually found and that her cremated remains were given to her family. The fourth case we're going to talk about is not just bizarre or tragic, it's practically unfathomable. This one takes us to the European country of Croatia. Hedviga Golic was born in 1924 and was originally from Rijeka, Croatia. She was a former nurse and had last worked at a nearby community health center. Reports also say that she was a Jehovah's Witness. She apparently had a sister who was a school teacher in a nearby town, but they had broken off contact due to quarreling. Hedviga lived at Medevesk Street 77 in a 190 square foot, one-room attic apartment that was somewhat isolated from the other floors of the 4-story apartment building in the neighborhood of Zagreb. It was thought that the building superintendent had once been her boyfriend, and that was how she had the apartment. There is very little actual information out there about this case, but plenty of speculation. In fact, the picture you see in articles presuming to be her is actually Pia Ferenkov, whom we just talked about, as there are no pictures of Hedviga Golic on the internet. I did find an article in a Croatian news website that I translated, and I believe it will be the most factual account, so I'll be referencing it to tell the story. Hedviga's neighbors would describe her as mysterious and withdrawn. She didn't want to socialize with neighbors, but then when someone would do her a favor, instead of thanking them, she would shout at them. Others claimed that they had even seen her running uncontrollably down the street. The neighbors would also say that they thought she had schizophrenia, and that helped them to understand her life. They claimed that she had told some of them she was going on a trip, perhaps to Macedonia, to join a sect, which they said explained why they hadn't seen her in a while. The last person who would see Hedviga Golic was her neighbor, Katica Karik. She said that Hedviga lived above her, and when she needed something from the store, she would drop down a bag of money and a piece of paper saying what she needed. The neighbor would then bring the items to Hedviga's doorsteps, not speaking with the reclusive neighbor. A few of Hedviga's neighbors said that when they last saw her, she was in an unusual mood and was obviously thinking that someone would have to succeed her one day. Now that's what the translated version read, but it is somewhat confusing. My guess is they meant someone to manage her affairs once she was gone, or perhaps even care for her as she got older if needed. She had a sister who didn't live far away, and she seemed the logical choice. However, they had had a fight years prior and no longer had a relationship. It is thought that Hedviga's apartment and the electric bills were paid for by the architect of the building, who was said to be a prior boyfriend. However, he passed away in early 2008. After that, no one was paying for Hedviga Golic's apartment or her electric bill. The building that she lived in was to be turned into condominiums, and she was the only one who hadn't responded whether she agreed or disagreed. All attempts to contact her were unsuccessful, and the other tenants each seemed to want a portion of the tiny apartment. So it's unsure what year, but with a felt tip pen, this was written on her front door. Based on the law on inheritance of tenants, H. Golic was left without ownership inheritance. Until the resolution of ownership rights, the tenants cannot dispose of the apartment, and any attempt to dispose of it is a criminal offense. Signed by the City of Zagreb Census Commission and dated 1998. Then on May 12, 2008, without any response from the tenant, 3 representatives broke down the attic door of Hedviga's tiny apartment. As they looked around the room, they didn't notice anything that had been disturbed. But when they looked at her bed, it was hard to believe what they saw. Wrapped in blankets, lying on her bed, was Hedvige Golik. She was dead. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of this story. It is believed that Hedvige Golik had been lying in her bed undisturbed for as long as the past 42 years. Yes, you heard that right. The amount of years varies depending on where you look, but police believe she could have died in 1966 at the age of only 49 years old, while some say they believe she died in 1973, which is still 35 years of no one coming to check on her. But there are so many questions with this case that truly boggle the mind. First off, how did the neighbors not smell anything? Medical experts weigh in that since she was wrapped in blankets and probably died during the winter months, that may have been a reason why the smell wasn't stronger. It was also stated that her apartment was not near the others. Still, all of the experts agree that there would have definitely been a smell, so the question is, why didn't they notice and at least report it to the police so they could investigate? My thoughts on this case are probably similar to yours. How heartbreaking for Hedvige, and it shows such a disregard for human life. I really am disgusted by the actions or inactions of Hedvige's neighbors. Whether or not she was mentally stable or friendly to them, she was a human being. They see her and then they don't one day and never again, and they don't think anything of it. No one else moved into the apartment or moved her things out, so shouldn't that have been a clue to them? They claim that they thought she left to join a religious sect, yet she never traveled. I think that was just an excuse to make them look better. The only reason she was even found was due to their own selfish reasons and wanting to turn the building into a condominium. She doesn't respond to their demands, so they break down her door. I really wish Hedvige had better neighbors with common decency who would have checked in on her before decades went by and she was left to rot in that tiny apartment. So there you have 4 bizarre cases of missing people found in the most bizarre circumstances. Although these didn't happen around Halloween, they are definitely creepy stories that seem fitting to be told at this time of year and definitely fit the description of Halloween horrors. That concludes my podcast on Halloween horrors. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a rating or review where you listen to your podcast. You can find me on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and YouTube Music under one word, Lost and Found Podcast. I also have a website with all of my original articles and links to my most recent podcast at Lost and Found Blogs. I have social media pages under that name on Instagram, Facebook, and X. You can reach me via email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.